Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the briefing session of the Utah Board of Oil, Gas, and Mining for Wednesday, September the 25th, 2019. We welcome both you, Director Baza and Dana. You proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome members of the board. Special welcome to Mr. Brown. I know you're struggling today, but we hope you improve in your health soon. Today we have, it's kind of the Dana Dean show. She's going to give us briefings on a couple of different things, but the first one is a Horizon Mine forfeiture site that the board allowed us to proceed with, I think it's about 2 years ago. But that project is complete, and Dana is going to give you an update on that.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Board. First of all, before I even start this, I'd like to point out that this PowerPoint was put together by Keenan Sturar, who was assigned to this project and oversaw this project, the reclamation, along with the rest of the coal team designing it. So he's no longer with the division. He moved to be closer to family, so he was unable to present this, so I'm using his data. And the video I will show was done by Tom Thompson with the drone. So again, as John said, this is a site that unfortunately we had to forfeit the bond. If you recall, the bond was a condominium in downtown Salt Lake City. There was some controversy and difficulty selling that, but we finally did, and we got what we needed to do the job, and I think we've done a really good job there. This is one of the sites we'll visit on our field trip in October that we'll talk about more later. This is background context. In 2013, the active mining ceased at this mine. They were making a go of it pretty well for a while, but then they weren't able to get enough air to the face. They were not able to put in some ventilation shafts that they were hoping to due to landowner issues and things, and so they just couldn't solve the ventilation problem of getting enough air to the face, and complying with MSHA laws is one of the reasons that they shut down. And then you'll see there's a 5-year gap between when they shut down and when we began reclamation of the site. Part of that was we were working with the Hidden Splendor Resources, allowing them to have time to try and sell the property or come up with another way of addressing the problem. That didn't work out, unfortunately, for them, and we came to the board. The board very quickly ruled in our favor. We forfeited the bond, sold the condo, and began reclamation in 2018. This is what the site looked like when it was active. You can see the portals there, some equipment on site. They had this stacking tube, not very much coal at the time this picture was taken. In 2014, the company actually removed the facilities at the mine. You can see there's a lot of coal left there on the surface. They also had some plugged culverts that were definitely not working, and a sediment pond that was pretty full of sediment and in bad shape. A lot of extra sediment was going out of this pond into the stream during storms, which was not an ideal situation, and was one of the reasons that we acted at the time we did to forfeit the bond and go ahead with reclamation. This is that pond again, or this is the overall site looking up towards the portals after the facilities were reclaimed and just before we started our reclamation job. So there were 3 portals. One of them we were able to go in by enough to put in a block wall in addition to the backfill that we did. 2, we were not able to because of roof conditions and air conditions. MSHA wouldn't allow us to. So you'll see that we had, in order to comply with the BLM's rules and have them feel like their coal was being protected, nothing would happen to it. We ended up, after we tore down the portals here and backfilled them, 2 of them we had to put these concrete pads over. We called them the Jeff McKenzie driveways, because Jeff McKenzie at the BLM insisted that there be both the backfill and the concrete wall. So the concrete wall went on top of the backfill in this case, and he was satisfied with that, and we were able to work with the BLM and make sure that they were happy with what happened. So there's a before and after of the portal areas. Those, as you can see, the concrete pads were backfilled and put back to grade that fit in more naturally with the surroundings. Keenan put this in just to show we have to put a scope of work together for the contractors to work off from, and he put this in here just to show how that became reality in the field. So this called for the channel to be 8 feet wide at the bottom and have a 2-to-1 slope on the side, and then the grade to be from 3.8 to 9%. And you can see in the field, here's the 8-foot wide channel at the bottom, the 2-to-1 setback, and at this point, it's an 8% grade. So that definitely, the contractor did a really good job, but we are on site during the work to make sure that these things go as planned and turn out as they're supposed to be in the mining and reclamation plan. Here, this is just a picture of some of the equipment during the work. A better high picture of what was going on. There was a lot of dirt. In fact, we found there was a lot more material on site than we anticipated. We had a lot of extra topsoil, which is sometimes we don't have enough topsoil, so that was a good situation to be in. And then here's the drone video. It's about 3 minutes. Hopefully it's of interest. Sorry. This was taken in June of last year, so not quite. Yeah, this is. Yeah, well, that was June, but this will show a little progress through the activity. It started in June. I believe it ends in August. You can see that said pond is totally full of sedimentation, not effective at letting sedimentation settle out before it goes out. This is heading back up toward that portal area. Sorry, this has some music with it, but it's not playing. It's not the best music either, though. There you can see the portals before we started. And then up above the site where the stream comes in. So you can see it's not a very big site, but it was pretty messy. Not really causing a lot of off-site impacts. Just like I said, sedimentation was the biggest issue we were worried about. So this is August of 2018, and this was after some work had been done, but we'll see later in the slideshow that it wasn't quite complete. But most of the channel has been constructed at this point. You can see all the coal is gone and how everything's recontoured to fit back into the channel. The culverts have been taken out. Here they're probably trying to figure out what to do with all that muck. And then that's the final contouring before they did the riprapping and the pocking, which I'll show in some pictures. But again, thanks to Tom Thompson for that video. Oops, sorry. This is just I'll skip that. That's where the topsoil pile was. It was supposed to be 10 inches deep. Again, we had more topsoil than we needed. Here they are topsoiling over the top of the waste rock there. Here's when they started caulking, and they were using some mulch there to make sure that things were stable. This is the plan for the riprap. Gravel filter on the bottom and placed across the channel and 2 feet up from the banks. And then the riprap was 1 foot on top and 1 foot up the bank. And you can see them placing that here. They very carefully worked down from the top. Put the gravel filter there, you can see that, and then the riprap up at the top. They put some logs in some places, just slow flow and be more natural with the surrounding area. This is a panoramic of when they had finished with the riprap of the whole channel. Blends in pretty well. You can see the contractor did a really good job of blending in. They've got the mulch on there. Things are pocked and ready for seeding. And Keenan put this in here to thank division staff who helped and the Nelco contractors. But I really do want to thank Keenan and the rest of the coal staff who took a mining and reclamation plan that was pretty good, but they turned it into specifications for a contractor. They also added new ideas that we could use in 2019 that maybe hadn't been thought of when the mining and reclamation plan was put in place. And Nelco were really good contractors. They did a great job. They didn't need a lot of, they didn't need to be told much. They knew how to do it. They have very skilled operators, and they did a great job. Anyway, that's the Horizon job. Next week, our staff is going to go out and do some supplemental seeding and some weed control. Unfortunately, some thistle has invaded here. But so there's a little bit more to be done. We're not ready to release this from our obligation quite yet. But it's looking pretty good, and we were able to do the job with the money that we had. The exploration holes that were a question, we've tracked those down. They've all been reclaimed. There are some water wells that we thought we would need to reclaim with our remaining money, but most of the landowners want to retain those, and so they're working with water rights on the application to, still on the change orders to have those as, to retain those as water wells. So we were able to save money with some of the things that the staff did and with the landowners wanting to take the water wells, and so this project turned out really well. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to try and answer them.
Questions, board members? Mr. Hanson?
I don't really have a question. I just wanted to say that I've been up there several times and that the reclamation is excellent. It's as good or better than some of the operators, the current operators are able to accomplish. So
Thank you.
well done.
Yeah, again, I think the staff did a great job, and Nelco were really good contractors. I appreciate the compliment, Chris. We will be going to see the site in October. Because of the pocking and the riprap channel, it might not be someplace we can walk around quite a lot, but that's where Tommy will be doing a drone demonstration, and he'll have a monitor so we can see what he sees on the drone, and that'll be interesting for us all to see what it looks like right now. Anything else? Okay.
I might add that one of the lessons we learned from this, even though the condominium had been posted as a bond probably in the 1980s, it was problematic in terms of trying to address that forfeiture. And even though the coal rules allow for that type of collateral bond to be put up, I think we're going to strongly discourage that type of bonding in the future. Did you want to add to that, Dana?
I agree. A lot of people have been concerned about self-bonding throughout the country, and at meetings I go to with other states, I've told them, you may be concerned about self-bonding, but beware of collateral bonding because it's almost as difficult. It was very difficult to sell the property. It was difficult to gain title to the property cleanly, and collateral is not the answer in my mind. We have worked with people when that's the only option, but I would like to avoid it, as John said, if possible, if people have other options.
Because in the end, it did affect the type of reclamation we could do, and it put a very severe upper limit on the amount of reclamation that could be done.
Yeah.
Anything else? All right, thank you, and we will get a chance to visit the site in our October field trip. The next thing that's on the agenda is to discuss regulatory, I guess, philosophy regarding sand and gravel. We have learned that, well, first of all, let me go back a few years. The legislature had a task force that studied sand and gravel regulation back in the early 2000s. And as a result of that, the division has limited authority over sand and gravel operations, and we're finding that especially to be difficult along the Wasatch Front as housing and residential areas and development starts to encroach on existing historical sand and gravel operation. So Dana has some briefings she'd like to do on that. I don't think there's a presentation, but I'll let you cover that, Dana.
No, there's not a presentation, but Julianne, I think, handed out some bullet points for you. So this has been an issue for years, but it's really coming to a head right now. And I don't want to make it sound like we're anti-sand and gravel or anything like that. We certainly aren't. But right now, sand and gravel of a certain size is exempted from our regulation if it's that size in place. And we are just trying to educate people about how difficult it is for us to do our jobs when there's such a fine distinction. And also, we think it creates an unfair playing field between the operators. So we're trying to get awareness of this issue. We're certainly not trying to change anything at the moment. We're trying to get people aware. If we had an opportunity to run a bill and had people on board with this, we would want to change our statute, but I know there's a lot of work to do on that. We usually meet with the Associated General Contractors at least once a year. They invite us to their meetings. We haven't quite had a chance to meet with them this year. Last year, they were talking a little bit about agreeing with us on this, but then the critical infrastructure minerals bill that came out last year went a little bit different direction, and I don't really know what's happening on that. But these are just issues that have come up with my staff, and I've seen it being hard for them to decide when to take action. For example, a few weeks ago, a cessation order was written because a mine had started mining. They were in the exempted material, but they had also built a 20-acre, or at least 20-acre facility to go along with this exempted operation. That 20-acre facility didn't have to have a cultural resources survey. No soils information was collected. We don't know if soils were gathered and stockpiled for later reclamation. They didn't have to get a permit with us. It's in a possible sage grouse area. Sage grouse were not considered whatsoever. And, our people had to go look at this. Anyway, so our inspector wrote a cessation order. And then the conference, there was an informal conference. I was the officer. I really empathized with the inspector. And I thought, wow, 20 acres, that's a lot of disturbance with none of those things happening where you have people in other situations where they maybe are mining decorative stone and they're only mining half an acre. They had to do a cultural resource study and they had to do a soils, they had to do a lot of things and have a permit with us. And this facility's out there with 20 acres. But the rules exempt sand and gravel. And so I was unable to uphold that cessation order. The company gladly is working with us, and they are working to permit future disturbance because they will be going into bedrock, which is regulated at some point in the near future. So the future of that facility we're not worried about, but it seems like there's not a level playing field. You can have two operations right next to each other. One is regulated by us, has to do all sorts of baseline studies in order to get a permit, has to have a bond, We inspect regularly, and then just because geology is slightly different, right next door you can have the exact same facility with no regulation from the state. I did have one meeting with the League of Cities and Towns, and their expression was that many cities and towns and counties don't know how to regulate mining, and they don't want to regulate mining. We're not trying to zone. They don't want to mine. And so it would be nice for operators to know wherever they're going in the state that the rules are the same. It would be nice for us to know if it looks like mining, yes, we should be worrying about that facility, because it does take a lot of our people's time. If they're out doing inspections and they drive past something that looks like mining, they have to go check that. That wastes time if it's a non-permitted facility because of the size of the in-place material. So again, it's just for information. Our desire would be to change the statute and remove that exemption for sand and gravel, but we know it's a very controversial topic, and we need more people on our side in order to pursue that. So John allowed me to get you informed. If you have more questions about it, I'd be glad to answer them. But it's just a fairness thing more than anything, a fairness. It seems like if one business is doing the exact same thing, it's already easier for the guy who just has to pick up the sand and gravel and screen it. He's already got a cheaper process than the guy that has to blast it, and then he's also not regulated. And so it seems like an unfair playing field, but also we're concerned about the resources that could be lost without the baseline studies that the mining people have to do.
And in bringing this to you, I think we're very interested in receiving direction from the board on the proper course of action to take. I think a statutory change would be kind of our ideal. We could get that in place. But if you have other suggestions on maybe different ways to cure this, we'd certainly like your opinions.
Yeah, and again, I don't know if anyone from Associated General Contractors is here today, but we would definitely are not trying to not work with them. I want to continue to work with them on something that they find reasonable for them as well. And I think that we try to be very efficient and reasonable in our regulation, so it's not necessarily a huge burden to be regulated by us, but I am not trying to not communicate with them and work with them. I just haven't had the opportunity yet to be invited to one of their meetings this year.
So I haven't looked at those rates. What is the differentiation between sand and gravel versus mining?
Okay, so it's a very the second page of that handout that I gave you shows the statute. So the statute says it gives a definition of mining and says it exempts sand, gravel, and rock aggregate. In our rules, there's a definition of sand. There's a definition of gravel and rock aggregate. But basically, if it's a certain size that I don't have memorized, but if it's a certain grain size in place that's pretty small, or if it's unconsolidated material or some consolidated material that's in the middle of a bunch of unconsolidated material, then it's exempt. So if you can just go out to a sandbar and pick it up without blasting, that's exempt from our regulation. If this is just a rule of thumb, if you're in bedrock and blasting, then that's regulated. But it's a very non-correct, according to geologists and engineers, size designation, but that's what's in the rules. It's a size. So if it's under a certain grain size, and then it's considered sand and gravel and exempt from our regulations. So it's kind of arbitrary, really. But the legislature exempted it at the beginning of the regulations, and they studied the topic, I think, in 2004 again and punted again. But it just, with the amount of sand and gravel needed for the construction on the Wasatch Front and throughout the state, there's a lot more activity happening, and it's starting to affect a lot more areas, and it really does create an unlevel playing field for the operators.
I might add that in practice, when there's a dispute between a sand and gravel operator and the division on whether it is a mining operation, we will often ask a third-party geologist to come and assess the site and provide us with an opinion as to whether it falls into that category or does not.
Yeah.
But so your traditional, like out in the basin, there's a lot of just kind of open pits, and they take this size, cobble rock that's mixed in with everything else and crush it. That is exempted then.
It could be, yes. If the majority of the material is that smaller size and there's just a little bit of cobble rock in there, yes. So crushing isn't it's usually, again, rule of thumb, blasting, but that's not necessarily it's more technical than that. And again, yeah, the Utah Geological Survey does help us make those determinations when needed.
Mr. Hanson?
As you've been thinking about permitting these, or the possibility of requiring permits, have you given any thought to the cost of the permittee?
To the permittee,
On a per acre basis for the studies, and because that'll probably be the
right.
contentious issue will be the cost of.
No, we realize that, no, we haven't necessarily done an analysis of that or really thought about it. We realize that it does cost more to be permitted by us. But again, you could have an operation right next door to each other where one guy didn't have to spend that money and the other guy did. So we do realize that, yes, this could increase some of the costs for the operator. It definitely would require us to have more staff in our minerals program because we already don't have enough staff to keep up with everything that's happening around the state. So overall, it would be more costly. But again, we're looking at it as a fairness issue and a conservation of resources. I mean, the mining rules are in place to conserve resources and make sure that things get reclaimed. And if you're exempt from that, but you're doing almost the exact same thing, it just seems unfair that it's that way. So, yes, we understand that's probably a concern of the operators, but many of these operators have several permits with us, and then they just don't for the exempt sites because why spend that money when you don't have to? But they're very familiar with our processes and the costs, and I'm sure Associated General Contractors could come up with a cost-benefit analysis. They probably know much more about how much those studies cost than I would, but it is something that I'm sure people will need to consider.
I'm just thinking about the potential political pushback.
Oh, yeah. I'm
Using this, some guy who's saying, hey, why am I going to spend $20,000
Right.
on wildlife, RKO, and
yeah.
for something I'm only going to get $15,000 out of?
Exactly. So that's why we're not just writing a bill and running up to the Capitol and trying to get a sponsor. We're trying to inform as many people as possible and try to get a conversation going, but really try to have people think about this and think about it. Like I said, we're trying to just make sure the archaeological resources, wildlife resources, soils and vegetation resources are being conserved as they should be, and that there's more of a fairness among operations.
Mr. Brown?
So, I guess a couple of comments. Are you going to continue then looking for sponsors for a bill on the Hill, or where are we at on that?
We have not started that process at all. We would like to get more of a consensus before we get to that point. So we're just informing right now.
Well, my personal opinion on this is that mining operations, oil and gas operations, sand and gravel operations exist and operate at, the will and desire of the community that they work in. And if they're not going to operate in a way that's environmentally responsible and sensitive to all of the issues, then we have to drive this to a rule and a regulation. So I guess my suggestion would be to continue to work with the association and let them know that, there are there's certainly motivation from the board to make them become part of a regulated community if they're not responsible enough to regulate themselves. And I'm sure that there are operators out there that don't understand a lot of the technical side of reclamation and operating properly. These are usually smaller operations with serious cost considerations, but they're also opportunistic, and so they have a tendency to do the kind of damage we don't typically see with
Right.
responsible operators. So I kind of gone all over the place. I personally would be in support of some really strong discussion with the association, and if they can't get the people in line to do the work, then we have to regulate the community that this is operating under.
Thank you. Again, I will say that we have been trying to get invited to a meeting, but we haven't tried super hard or said specifically that we wanted to talk about this. So I'm not making it sound like the association is ignoring us on this issue. We just haven't had the opportunity to gather and speak about this. Again, last time I did speak with them, they seemed like they were moving in this direction and agreed with us. Again, most of the people operating these exempt operations have permitted operations, so they understand how things work, and they're responsible operators who want to do the right thing. And so I look forward to having more conversation with the association. I just have not had that opportunity yet at this point this year.
Oh, one last question, Dana. When you send a geologist over to ascertain characteristics of the deposit, are you looking for placer opportunities, or are you looking for locatable minerals? What are you trying to do that would trigger that to become
No,
regulated under mining?
again, our rules, I could look it up if you want me to, but the rules, after the statute was written, the rules were made, and the rules say, grain size of, I don't know, 0.05 millimeters or less. Don't quote me on that. I do not have the rule memorized, but it's just it's a size. It's simply size. And so what the geologist is looking at is the majority of this deposit of this, it's usually alluvially deposited, but they're looking for mostly a size, and whether the majority of the deposit falls into that size. So, yeah. And it's geologists and engineers do not like the way the rule is written. It doesn't make sense normally, but I don't know where it came from, but it's definitely a size designation.
There's other tentacles involved with starting to mess with aggregate operations. There's royalty issues. There's all kinds
Right.
of issues that can be impacted. So I think we really need to sit down with the association and make sure they understand what's going to happen if they don't.
Okay, I agree, and maybe it would be helpful to invite you and some other board members if we have a meeting scheduled. Okay. So that's one of the things that we're concerned about is some of these operations will start in what is very clearly exempt material, and because of the geology, they very quickly get into a material that should be regulated, and then we're faced with writing them a cessation order because they started a mine without a permit. So we'd like to avoid those and have everyone have a level playing field and know ahead of time, these are the things you need to do in order to start this operation. So that's all we're trying to do is be more fair, make more sense, conserve more of the resources for the people of Utah, and make it so that the operators know what the requirements are from county to county without having to wonder.
Mr. Moon?
So do you have cities and counties, local jurisdictions kind of reaching out saying, we have problems?
Yes, we have had some reach out. We have some that work really well with us, and when they get an application for a conditional use permit, they'll let us know. Others don't. So it just depends on the county or the city.
I would guess it would be different between the large cities
Yes.
and counties versus the rural. And
Yes,
from rural, I'm thinking about that, and
Yeah.
the fairness idea, makes some sense. You want a level playing field, but also we would really want justification for what, rule or law we're asking for.
Right.
So that it makes sense to those, because I'm thinking of the smaller operators that are,
Right, yeah, and we definitely aren't intending to impede business or add a lengthy process that would hurt a small operator who's trying to bid, say, on a UDOT project that they need to have a time commitment of when they'll have that material available. We try to be super efficient and get things done quickly, and we would continue to do so, but there are those things that we certainly would want to think about as we're moving forward.
yeah, so I would just encourage you to reach out to those local jurisdictions, county planners, that, so that we have their input.
Right, good.
They're concerned about economic development, and they're concerned about the same things
Right.
the division is, but just to strike a balance there.
Okay, yes, very, very good points.
Maybe just a suggestion. The governor's office has a special position for intergovernmental conflicts and things like that, but one of them is also intergovernmental voids. And so I would make them aware of what this is and put it on their radar screen.
Do you know who that
I
person-
think there's some benefit to that. And
Okay,
It's a very good
yeah,
suggestion.
good suggestion. So I have set up a meeting and talked to the governor's office and make sure that we're coordinating with counties and cities.
particularly if you've got, federal issues like sage grouse, and you have, I think Mike, said it the best. He said, you only stay in business as long as the community, how do you say it, Mike? You serve at you stay in business and you serve at the pleasure of the community, and if you begin to offend enough people, then that will result in something happening.
Right.
Okay. Thank you very much. Both were very informative.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the last couple of things I want to cover have to do with our coming field trip and agenda for the October meeting, which we intend to have in Price. And Dana has put together the field trip. There should be a map in your materials, and I think Julianne may have handed you a schedule this morning, but I'll let Dana go ahead and provide that information to you.
So we were asked to go to Price again, and seems like the last couple of times we've gone there, we've done an underground coal mine tour, which were awesome, and I never turned down an opportunity to go underground in a coal mine, but we thought we'd do something different this time that didn't burden the operators and could show you more of the reclamation work that we've done. So we're planning, and also to not have a 12-hour field trip day. I know those get long, and all of you have a lot of work to do, and you don't want to get too overscheduled the day before the board hearing. So we'll be meeting at 9:15 here at the DNR building, and we'll drive down to the Price area. We'll stop at the Willow Creek overlook, and we can talk about the coal pile, burning coal pile that used to be there, that the abandoned mines program reclaimed years ago, and also the Willow Creek and Castlegate mines, which have both gone through Phase 3 bond release. That's the success measure of the coal program, is you mined, you reclaimed, and you got Phase 3 bond release. So we'll look at the good work that's been done there and talk about that. Then we'll stop at our Price field office to have lunch in the auditorium. And then we'll go out in the field. First, we'll visit the Kenilworth project. That's a project that the Abandoned Mine Lands program completed this year, where a channel was eroding into a coal pile, and it was threatening some people's homes. When big storms come through, there were some pretty big flows, and it was starting to affect some property owners in the area. We went in and put in a really nice channel that will hold a lot of water and will keep it away from people's homes. And then after that, we'll go to the Horizon site. And as I said, Tom Thompson will be giving us a drone demonstration there. He said that he thinks he'll be able to put one of these big monitors in the back of one of the vehicles from the motor pool and show you all on this big monitor what he sees on his little monitor when he's flying the drone and gathering the information that we need for these projects. So hopefully that will be a great thing. There's a kiosk just down the road there that was put in years ago talking about reclamation and historic mining that we might stop by if we have time. And that's all we had planned. If the board would like to see anything else, please let me know so we can plan ahead of time. Otherwise, we'll probably have an early afternoon, get back to the hotel, and then Julianne can be in charge from then on, not me.
Thank you very much.
I did want to mention to you that as part of the board briefing in Price, the outfit, and I'm not sure exactly their role, but they've represented to me that they will be handling the construction of a rail project as it becomes, moves on in the process. I think, I'm forgetting the name of it, but it has the name Rio Grande in the organizational name. But I think the chief executive officer is going to be coming to give you a briefing on where they're at with their plans and their project as part of the briefing at the board hearing the next day in Price. So we've got that scheduled, and if there's any, again, as Dana said, if there's anything else you'd like to hear from us on in Price, we'd be glad to do that.
Thank you very much. Anything else on that?
No, just a couple of dates coming up. On the 10th of October, we have another Uinta Basin Collaborative meeting scheduled for in Duchesne at the normal location, and then we'll have our board meeting in Price, and we'll just look forward to the holidays from there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'd have one issue that I'd like to mention. We know you're busy, but we have requested a scheduling scheduling, I don't know, was it an order? A scheduling order draft for purposes of the operator rulemaking and operatorship rulemaking and the horizontal drilling rulemaking. Could you just give us a status report on that?
Well, I know that the oil and gas program is working to develop drafts on both of those things, and we certainly want to have, as Dana has mentioned on sand and gravel, we want to have collaborative discussions with the association also on what kinds of things they might desire to see as part of that order. I don't know that we've put forth any plans on scheduling yet, and we'll have to have that discussion and prepare that for the board.
We do want to have both of those sets of rulemaking completed in March 2020.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
I understand that.
Okay, the time is now open to the public for any matter within our jurisdiction. Does anyone like to come forward and discuss an issue with us? Seeing none, then we're going to be in a break. Oh, you're behind the pole. Please come forward, identify yourself and who you represent. And for our purposes, we need you to speak directly into the microphone, pretty close to it. Not just, yeah, about that. I understand. And I'm not picking that up.
There's a button you might need.
Get the green light on.
Yes, thank you. That's the right kind.
Give me just a moment to pull out my literature here. Well, I want to thank you, Mr. Gill, and fellow board members for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm here to discuss a letter that I wrote to the board, roughly on July 9th, regarding the expansion of the caverns for Sawtooth Caverns in the Delta area. And I should first, I guess, speak as to who I am. So my name is John Bloom, and I have 30 years of experience in the mining industry, principally. I have 2 degrees in geology.
May I interrupt you for a moment, please?
Sure.
Does this, Matt, what you're going to talk about deal with one of the docketed items that we're going to talk about today?
Yes, it does.
Then could we have you wait in that? So we need to get this on the court reporter transcript.
I don't mind at all. It'll give me more time to practice what I want to say.
Okay, then.
Thank you, Mr. Gill.
Yes. Thank you. Seeing no more comments, then we'll be on a break till the start of our formal meeting at 10 a.m.